that is totally fine. Just make sure that you remain on mute for today's session. That'll make sure that you don't show up on the live recording, and it'll keep your privacy in place. Now, to keep moving here with the rest of our housekeeping items, like I said, today's session is being recorded as well as live streamed to our website and to our YouTube channel today. So the great thing about this is so that since we're recording, you don't have to worry about, if you missed what somebody said or you didn't quite catch that resource that they linked you to. You can always go back and share review the live recording later. Now, everybody that registered with us for today's event, so all of you here, you are all going to get a link in about 1 to 2 business days from Power to Fly. We'll send you an email, and it'll have a link to where you can rewatch this chat on our website as well as on our YouTube channel. Now, if you hear something today, Marina says something that is just so amazing and mind-blowing and like, how did I not think of this before, that you have to share it with somebody. Friends, coworkers, relatives, doesn't matter. You do not have to wait the 1 to 2 business days. You can always head over to our YouTube channel. We'll share the link to that in just a little bit here. So you can always head over to our YouTube channel. The live stream will be posted on our page, usually within about 5 to 15 minutes of the end of today's session. Now, if you are looking for closed captioning services, we do have our captions turned on today. But in case they are not as intense or as accurate as what you were hoping to find, you can always check out the closed captioning that's available. There's a website link on your screen. Now, if you do want to chat with us, let us know what you want to ask to our speaker today. Like I said, please feel free to put that information into the chat. If you have a question that you would like to ask, but you want it kept anonymous, that is totally fine. What you're going to do is, instead of sending that message to everyone in your Zoom chat, you're going to drop down that little menu and pick Power to Fly. You're going to DM that question to the Power to Fly account. That way we can hopefully ask your question to the speaker, but keep you anonymous. Now, as we go forward through the rest of the event, I'm just super, super excited to see so many new faces here. So just don't forget, make sure that you keep yourself on mute for the duration. If you got questions, make sure you put them into the Zoom chat. All right, now, last thing before we introduce you to our speaker, is we want to talk a little bit about Meta. Marina is here today on behalf of Meta, and we want to make sure that you all know how you can get even more information about this great company. So there's a link that we'll be sharing with you in the chat thread right now that'll take you to Meta's company page on powerfly.com. It's going to look much like what you see in front of you here. On that company page, you can read more about Meta. You can check out their insights library. That'll give you, information on past events they have participated on with us. You can also check out their open jobs, which obviously is a huge selling point for most of us. And if you are on Meta's company page and you are interested in working with them, but maybe don't see anything that would really suit you just now, the best thing you can do for yourself is go to the top right-hand page or right-hand corner of that company page and click follow. It's going to do a couple of really great things for you, but basically what it functions like is your friend at the company. So it's going to tell Meta that you are interested in working with them even before you fill out an application. But it's also going to keep Meta on your radar by letting you know when they post new roles. So you don't have to feel like you need to keep coming back and checking individual job boards. You can just set it and forget it, and we will let you know, hey, they posted new roles this week. Make sure you check those out. So I absolutely recommend you do that. You can follow and unfollow as many companies as you'd like, as many times as you like on Power to Fly. But obviously, we recommend that you take a look at Meta and check them out and see, if they've got something on their page that piques your interest. Now, I'm really, really excited to introduce you to Marina today. Now, Marina has almost 15 years of recruiting and sourcing experience, with more than 10 of those years spent inside a remote environment. So something that's very familiar, at least to most of us after 2 years of quarantine. Now, Marina is passionate about targeting non-traditional candidate pools. So just the kind of groups like that we see a lot of the time on Power to Fly, people who are transitioning, people who are coming off of a career break, people who have non-traditional education backgrounds. So obviously a cause that is near and dear to Power to Fly's heart as well. Now, outside of her job at Meta, Marina has 2 amazing kids and an anxious black lab who keeps her very busy. And Marina is a current Oklahoma State record holder for both Olympic weightlifting and powerlifting. She earned a spot to compete at Masters Nationals in weightlifting in 2021. So overall badass, and really excited to talk to Marina today. So Marina, is there anything else you'd like to add to this backstory or bio for our audience before we dive into questions?
No, that was great. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So last but not least, these are some of the takeaways that you can expect to get on today's session. Now, we came up with these main themes, both via conversations with Marina prior to today's session, but also by taking a look at the questions that you all submitted when you registered. So if you, one thing to know is that you all have the power to drive today's conversation. So if you have questions and you want to expand more on something that Marina was talking about, let us know in the chat. We can't ask if we don't know that that's what you want to know. So, all of this to say, we want to make sure that the time that you spend with Power to Fly and great companies like Meta is worth it for you. So help us out here. Let us know what you want to learn. If you have a question and you submitted it and you're not sure if we're going to get to it, ask it again. We love to see that participation from our community. So some of the main things we're going to cover, we're going to talk about how you can create meaningful connections in that hybrid work environment. We're going to discuss some ways to find balance between in-person and remote, since most people are not operating solely in one or the other. And then we're going to discuss some strategies to make yourself heard, as well as rise to other challenges within the hybrid workspace. So Marina, I'm really excited to jump in with questions today. So let's start off with one that was a very, very popular question. This person wrote in saying, some say that it takes complete intentionality to achieve a balanced hybrid workplace. Do you agree with this?
I do, actually. So I worked for 10 plus years in a remote environment where I was remote in Oklahoma, very rural Oklahoma. And it was a hybrid workforce in that most of my team was actually on site in Chicago. So I started out as a leader of a small team and moved to a leader of a large team during that time I was in Oklahoma. And there's a lot of intentionality that has to happen when you have that hybrid workforce. When I first started leading remotely, we were one of the first adopters of Zoom, which we're on right now. It's come a long way, I will tell you that. But we had the adoption of video technology. At the time that I took over the larger team, I had implemented a once a month video conference call, which you would have thought that I had completely changed everyone's job by the initial reactions everyone had. But there's a lot of intentionality in terms of how you interact in a hybrid workforce. So you can't just walk over to someone's desk, say hello, hey, I've got a problem, can you help me with this? You have to be very intentional about how you communicate, how you reach out, how you come across in written communication and verbal communication when you don't have that face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I started working remote with Power to Fly. It was my first remote job, and got to start 3 years ago. So my transition to remote life was completely different than what a lot of people went through in the last 2 years of, having to kind of make that change on the spot, but also not having a workplace that was designed from the ground up for remote. And I love the way you kind of focus on the fact that it does take that intentionality. It's not that you can't communicate or get the same kind of communication, same types of communication in a hybrid or in a remote workforce. It doesn't happen organically. You have to create the spaces for this, correct, right?
Yeah.
All right. So when we are kind of doing this, trying to make these changes with that intentionality, how essential do you think empathy is to this process? I feel like there's a lot of people that know that there's, people on their team that have things going on, but they might not really understand it or be as supportive as they could. So how essential is empathy to this process, and what do you think is impossible without it?
I think empathy is one of the most important qualities that a leader can have, especially in a hybrid or remote workforce. I think the pandemic has taught us a lot. My experience as a remote person, engaging with people that are in a hybrid environment in the office, has changed a lot over the last 2 to 3 years. And being back in the office now myself part-time, I do see that change, and it's totally for the better. I hate to say that, something good came out of the pandemic, because obviously it's very tough situation, but I do think this transition to a hybrid workforce allows leaders to have more empathy, and to feel it themselves as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why empathy is probably the most important characteristic a leader can have.
Yeah, for sure. Are there any leadership tasks or qualities that are completely, or I would say leadership tasks that are not possible if you don't have that empathy for your coworkers or for your team?
Yeah, I think people leave leaders a lot more than they leave organizations, right? So if you have a leader that is very task driven, that's all they care about is, did we reach this number? Did we reach this revenue? Did we reach this goal? And I don't care what your excuse is. I don't care what you did. I don't care that your child was sick. I'm mad that your child is on, or dog is, I apologize, my dog will be running around here as well. Be mad that you're interrupted on your communications. I think that's something that makes people feel unvalued and not understood. And I think a little bit of compassion and understanding and empathy goes a long way in making sure that people feel supported, and they put forth even better effort because they feel that compassion, that empathy, that support.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, times that I've been kind of either in crisis or having like, a lot of personal things happen, managers that took an interest and like asked for that context, it was huge. Like when you have these things happen in your life, you try to explain them to, to your manager or to your teammates or whatever. You're right. It feels like a lot of the onus of like trying to kind of prove that this is a valid reason is on you. And not having to take that extra step of like explaining to somebody like why you cannot do this, being taken at your word of like, hey, this is what's happening and I need this, this accommodation. It's not asking for, it's not making excuses. It's giving context to here is what else is going on.
And to add on to that, I think as a leader or a manager, I think there's a very fine line as well, where you have to be empathetic. I think it popped up in the chat, empathetic, or empathy at a minimum, sympathy at a minimum, or something along those lines. Sorry, it flashed really quickly. But I think it's really important to also hold people accountable, and problem solve with them. What are some different ways, some accommodations we can make to still get this done, and meet you kind of where you're at or halfway, or get you the additional support you need to make sure that the business still moves forward as well. Because at the end of the day, we are still here for a job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about a hybrid environment. Do you think that it's harder to build trust when you are not in a place where everyone is physically present? Do you think that it is harder in a hybrid environment versus, say, an entirely remote environment?
I would agree. I do think it is more difficult, but I think the way that you build trust is still very similar. And again, we talked a little bit earlier about you can't just pop over and say hello. You can't go to like a happy hour with that person and build that rapport that way. But I do think it's still that intentional building of trust. So some of the most important factors are effective, transparent communication, meeting that person on how they like to be communicated to. So something that I learned early on in remote work is that I can't just email, or I can't just ping, or I can't just call. I've got to do a kind of hybrid communication strategy where I'm reaching out to people in different ways and learning as I build that relationship with them, how they like to be communicated to, and making sure that I'm communicating effectively. I think additionally, it's super important as a leader to build trust, no matter whether it's virtual only, hybrid, or in person, that you do what you say you're going to do. I always tell my team I'm going to fight for them, not physically fight, obviously, but fight for what is right, make sure that I am representing them well to my leadership And in order to do that, they need to be open in communication with me. We need to problem solve. I can't always, get exactly where they think they need to be, but I'm always going to go with what's best for the team, and while balancing that with what's best for the company. So doing what you say you're going to do. I think it's also important to build that trust by showing genuine, empathetic connection and interest in that person as a person, not just like an employee on my team. I'm never going to call somebody my subordinate, for instance. They are a member of my team. They're a teammate. They're a metamate, if you will, as we call them now. But they're a genuine person with a genuine life, and they're someone that I want to support and know as a person. You have to walk that line, though, in terms of how much that person wants to share, what they want to hear about your personal life, things like that. But having that open communication, that transparency, and building that relationship helps build that trust.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting a lot of kind of chiming in the chat thread here. Artie says, totally agree with those strategies for effective communication and building trust. Being honest and transparent with peers and your managers is a great start to building that trust. I think that's really awesome. Sierra is also chiming in. Building trust and balancing your team's needs with your company's needs is, it's incredibly difficult to do, but having that transparency makes the balancing a lot easier when other people can see, hey, this is what we're trying to work around. I'm not just unilaterally making choices because that's what's easier for me. I think that's really important.
I think sorry, one more thing that
go for it,
popped into my
please.
mind. So I think it's also important to kind of solicit feedback and solicit ideas and buy-in from your team rather than just unilaterally giving them something, for instance, where you can. So recently I started a couple projects for candidate pipeline and engagement. Instead of building them out myself, which I'm perfectly capable of doing, I wanted to bring in my team. I kind of split them into, gave them a couple aspects of the project. I built out the framework and said, please bring me ideas on how we can implement this, any challenges you see from your viewpoint in our systems, in our process, and give me ideas of how you think you should be held accountable, what type of metrics you should be held to. And I did that for twofold. One, I'm at the leadership level. I came into Meta as a leader. I did not come in as a sourcer or an individual contributor. So I don't have the depth of knowledge that my team has in terms of our systems. I have the high level. They are in that system every day and they know it inside out. I want to make sure that what I'm implementing is on target for what they need to have done and isn't going to hurt them in any way in terms of our processes or our scorecards or anything like that. I also don't want them to think this is busy work or something that I'm implementing just to implement. I want them to see the value, help build out the value, bring different diverse ideas to the table, because they all come from different backgrounds and maybe they've done something differently somewhere else that would be great to transfer here. So it's super important to build that trust, build that buy-in where you can.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. That's absolutely crucial. All right, let's talk about some of the challenges of these environments. All right, what do you think some of the biggest challenges that you've had to face when it comes to hybrid and remote environments? Now, I personally, I think there's different things to kind of keep in mind. But what have you seen?
Yeah. So I've worked primarily in hybrid environments. My last job at a large retailer was actually 100% remote for the entire team. So I'll kind of break it into two. But when I first became a leader of a large team, I had about 16 people on my team. I was remote. I was hired in from a different team. I was on our tech teams for about 6 or 7 years and was hired into our high volume retail team. I had a couple people that had also interviewed for the role, so I had to overcome those challenges of some, initial disappointment and resentment and build those relationships. But there was also the challenge that at that time, out of the 16 people, 14 of them were on site in Chicago. I had 2 remote individual contributors and myself that was remote. So working with technology, this was, 6 or 7 years ago now, like when Zoom first came out, we didn't really use the video capability. We still used, I think it was Avaya phone systems. So I would have big team meetings where the team would sit in a conference room, and all we had was this little speaker, probably about this big, and it would sit in the middle of the table. And so I would be trying to lead meetings. My little tinny voice, I don't have a loud voice, if you couldn't tell anyway, but my little voice coming out of this little speaker in a room full of 14 people, sometimes the sidebar conversations, or they'd get really involved in talking about something, and I'd have to be like, hello, can anyone hear me? So that was definitely a challenge of a hybrid work environment when that first started. Ironically, that team, when I left to go to my next organization, had kind of done a 180. I had 2 people on site in Chicago and 14 people remote, because at that time we'd really started embracing the remote work life. I was promoted twice while remote into different leadership roles, constantly, over exceeding goals. Other people were exceeding their goals. So the company really embraced that. And I'm very thankful for that. Where I lived in Oklahoma, just for reference, there was one Walmart within a 90-mile radius, and my internet speed was 15 megabytes per second for 8 years. So video
I don't know how you did that.
Yeah, me neither, honestly.
Oh my
But
God.
yes. But we really embraced that remote culture. And so that was something that really enabled us to hire more people, different places, great talent that we wouldn't have tapped otherwise unless they moved to Chicago. So that's that. With the technology changes, I mean, I'm on my portal right now. If you're not familiar with that, it's a Facebook product. It's a little screen. I can do Zoom on it. I can do our internal things. It gives me another screen. I'm not plugging this. I'm just telling you, I really like it. It's very helpful. But like even this technology right here, how we're live streaming, how we're talking in person, like the technology has changed so much that it's enabled to build those relationships better. From a fully remote environment, it's pretty similar in terms of challenges. My last team, I worked there for about 2.5 years. I met them one time pre-pandemic. We all went to Tennessee and had a great time meeting in person, but it's definitely very interesting. One of the sourcers that I met there, I still talk to almost every day. And I've only met her once, and she's now one of my best friends. So it's crazy how you can build those relationships remotely and through, in your personal life too. So.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that was something that really struck me, especially as, I got to 6 months at the company, and then a year, and then 2 years, when family members would ask like, oh yeah, and who are you working with right now? I get to tell them like, well, one person on my team lives in Argentina, and one of them lives in Crimea, and a third lives in Palestine. And like, it's really, really cool. But then it's also kind of interesting because you end up spending all of this time like you would if you were in an office with people, and you get to know them. And you're right, it is kind of bizarre having these teams that you work with for months and years and you've never met, but you have this great rapport. And you're right. I mean, without the technology, it would completely be impossible.
And we work a lot cross-regionally. So I have a peer relationship with a sourcing manager in what we call EMEA, so in our European offices. He's out of London, but we meet on a monthly cadence and just talk about the challenges that we're seeing, our teams, we give each other advice and things like that. I do love his accent. He's English, obviously, but like the amount of value that I've taken from this relationship and vice versa has been really impactful in bringing some of our best practices even across, the Atlantic Ocean. And it's just a different, diverse perspective as well, looking at European work models versus the United States.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, there's definitely a lot of things that are very de rigueur practice in Europe that America needs to get on. So it is really, I love what you say. Yeah, it's really, really interesting, really cool how much broader your working life can become. What do you think are like the biggest advantages to that hybrid and remote space? Do you think it's the connection with people far flung, or do you think it's something else entirely?
So I think the connections are great. I think one of the most impactful things that I've seen has been the diversity of the workforce. Like for instance, I like to say that I was the only Meta/Facebook employee in Oklahoma, which may actually have been true. But where I lived, there was no opportunity to work at Meta. Pre-pandemic, I mean, Meta has been a company that I've wanted to work at since I lived in Chicago, which was about 9 years ago now. I moved like 8.5 years ago to Oklahoma. So even before I moved, I wanted to work at what was then Facebook. I had people on my team who transitioned, who are still there. Are here, I guess, technically now. I ping them and things like that. But I've only heard great things about working at Meta. The longevity of the people that I know personally. I don't know anyone who's actually left Meta that has been on my team. And we've had a whole bunch of people join. But it's something that is really like important to me, is to see that longevity and to see that happiness and that work-life balance.
Yes, 100%. Okay, so as we're talking about these relationships and that you cultivate, how do you get around the feeling that they're kind of forced or contrived? Is there a way to make sure that these connections, especially between team members, who are vastly far apart, how do you kind of help to foster really meaningful or real connections between your teammates?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that methods of communication, because it could be really feel very contrived if you are only communicating to them in a way that makes sense to you and maybe doesn't resonate as well with them. So in terms of ways that I get around that and I build that connection and make it seem more authentic, is I do a variety of different things. So we do have scheduled connections, one-on-ones, if you will. I've been at Meta for 10 months now, I think. And I still have one-on-ones weekly with my team. I also have one-on-ones with people that have transitioned to other teams. I do it on a much less frequent basis, but I keep that connection. I keep that touch point, give them another person, another leader to connect with and talk to. And I leave my one-on-ones fairly unstructured. So if my leadership's listening, go like this. But I want people to feel that they are able to talk to me about anything. So I do have some people on my team that want more of that structure. They want that agenda. And so we work with that and have more of a structured cadence. But I kind of listen to what their wants are, their communications are. I have people that want to do video calls. I had people at my last company who only wanted to do phone calls. I had people that we would go for walks together and talk on the phone. I had other people where it was at the desk and we would screen share. I think contrived relationships, it can feel contrived if you are forcing it. Having that open communication policy, building that trust, building that rapport, showing interest in their lives. I keep my team meetings very informal. We have all sorts of methods of communication, all sorts of ways that we communicate things out specifically for work. One of the things I did with my group is I made a virtual water cooler twice a month, and we come and we just talk. You could do happy hours, things like that. I started out at this company the same way I did my last company, which was 100% remote, where once a week we had what I called a dating question. So it would be like, if you had any superpower, what would it be? And we would popcorn it around, everybody would answer, and we'd like learn about each other that way. Some people hate that. Luckily, my team liked it or told me they liked it. But I would only do that once a week. Here, that kind of fell flat when I started, and I kind of heard that. And so I peeled it back and made it more informal. On our greater team meetings, we will still do questions like that occasionally as icebreakers, because as a team of 60, it's harder to get to know people. But I think building that genuine connection is really impactful for keeping those relationships from being contrived.
Yes, I'm absolutely loving what you're saying. We've got a lot of people in the chat kind of chiming in here. People saying that they do like virtual happy hours, birthday celebrations, that kind of thing. And you're right. Yeah, it can
babysit.
feel kind of forced. So if you're trying to bring that fun back into the hybrid workspace, do you have any tips for people that are trying to introduce a little bit more fun into their work life, but maybe aren't getting that kind of buy-in or feedback from other people?
Yeah, I think so. I think I have some good ideas. So there's always icebreakers. Again, that's a hit or miss with people. But there's all sorts of stuff on the internet. We play different games. We played, it's a version of Pictionary. Don't ask me what it's called. But that was really fun where we did a virtual Pictionary. We've done virtual scavenger hunts. I saw a question pop up. What is a remote walking one-on-one? It's basically we both get on our cell phones and go for a walk outside instead of sitting at the desk and talking on the phone. Um, we've done virtual baby showers. We've done virtual birthday parties, like they said. Um, I think one of the things that I really like about Meta is we have, I don't want to call them fun captains because I don't think that's the title we call it, but we get the team involved. Like it's not just me saying, okay, today we're going to do this icebreaker. So we have people who are kind of the point of contacts for the team activities, and then they plan fun things, they solicit from their teammates, and then it gives them that sense of responsibility and empowerment to make it fun in a way that they want to see the fun versus me telling them how they're going to have fun. So
It'll be fun, I promise. Just come on,
right.
it'll be fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a hard battle to
Yes,
fight.
Kahoot. I saw Kahoot pop up. That is
Yeah,
something we
yeah.
do as well.
Somebody else is saying the GroupMe app is another great option there. Sharon is sharing let's see, virtual birthday celebrations have worked. They pick a virtual background based on a theme that connects with the person.
Yes.
Their former manager loved Winnie the Pooh, and when they celebrated, the team all did Winnie the Pooh backgrounds. Honestly, I think that's adorable. I love that idea. And so that is really, really cool. Thank you for sharing those. Go right ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I will also do themed team meetings. They are completely optional, and some people like participate, some don't. But like for Halloween this year, we all dressed up in costume, so there was some very interesting costumes. So
Oh yeah.
I was a pinata. So
What? Well, now I need
yeah.
to see pictures. That sounds absolutely amazing. We did stuff like that early on in the pandemic. We would have like themed days for like the weekly stand-up call. So at one week, everybody wore your craziest hat you could find. We had another one where people were like, oh, it was during Drag Race. And so we were going to do an eleganza meeting. So like the amount of glitter and sparkles that showed up to that meeting was just amazing. I loved it. But yeah, I mean, I think I like that idea of kind of starting small and figuring out what works for the group dynamic, or at least works better than another option.
I think another, and this just popped into my head, another thing that I focus on is we have.
Sorry, Marina, you got cut off. I'm so sorry. I was trying to mute and I hit you instead. Apologies for that.
No worries. So we have internal chats on our system, so like Slack or Teams or things like that, and we have different groups that are set up. So I have my own team group, and yes, there is business in there, but we also, send memes a lot. Happy birthdays. We do shout outs. My team chat's very active, and I've kind of cultivated that culture because I feel it brings people closer together. So sense of humor, I think is important. And that's kind of a culture thing at Meta as well, is we've all engaged with each other through these different methods of communication, and people can engage or they don't have to. It's completely optional. No one's forcing you to send a meme, good morning or anything like that. But we poke fun at one person in particular. He's not on my team anymore, but I haven't kicked him out of my chat yet because he brings this breath of like humor and fresh air. And he's worked with several of the people on my team for many years, 4 years plus at this point. And the dynamic that they have is just amusing to everybody else. So building those relationships even virtually is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's kind of shift gears here a little bit. We've got a little less than 30 minutes left in the chat. So if y'all have questions, please share them. We've been collecting them as you submitted them. So please feel free to keep sharing those. We will be going through a lot of your questions in a couple minutes here. Let's talk a little bit about DEI. So when you are trying to create this balanced and healthy work culture, why do you think that DEI is so crucial to that, to that formula?
Yeah, 100%. I am a firm believer that diversity in every aspect is incredibly important. So diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of, every other category you can think of, because if you have everyone who thinks the same, you're always going to be the same. You're not going to grow. You're not going to learn. You're not going to grow as an organization, and you're not going to grow as a person. It's kind of like the same thing of having no one who will push back or disagree with you because they don't have a different perspective. Bringing in diverse perspectives, bringing in diverse backgrounds, bringing in diverse experiences is so critical in growth of an organization. So that would be why I think.
I mean, I completely agree. You do end up with sort of an echo chamber and a lot of, kind of reinforcement or what am I trying to think of, confirmation bias.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. When you're trying to bring in new people, it's always kind of a crapshoot about how things are going to kind of turn out. But
Yes.
what do you think is one of the keys to successfully bringing in new hires and really immersing them in that culture, especially when the workplace is hybrid?
Yeah. So in the recruiting field, I think recruiting sourcing is the same everywhere. Almost no one, I can't say no one at this point, but almost no one went to college and said, I'm going to be a recruiter when I grow up. Everyone fell into it somehow. I was interviewing for, I think, a buyer role and was talking to her, and she was like, "Oh, have you ever thought about recruiting?" I'm like, "Is that what you do?" And like, I had no idea. And I was on the swim team in college. I was in a sorority. So I recruited our chef for our sorority. That was the first time I'd ever actually hired someone. And he's actually been on several Bravo TV shows. So yay, Gary. But, it was something that really captured my interest really quickly. And I started out in contingency staffing, which I hesitate to say I think everyone should, but I kind of think everybody should. It's kind of that you get it's a great place to learn work ethic, to learn adversity, how to overcome, to have difficult goals, things like that. But I'm an incredibly competitive person. So, commission based was good for me 15
Yep.
years ago. I don't want it now, but it's definitely something that I think resonates with a lot of people. People don't fall into recruiting. And I think there's a lot of transferable skills. So we have a program here at Meta called the Sourcer Development Program, or SDP. I was here for 3 weeks. Last summer I had started, and my director was like, "Hey, do you want to PM a project?" And I was like, "Sure, I love projects." I had just gotten out of training, guys. Like, I had no idea what was going on. And it is this program where we hire people who have had no recruiting or sourcing experience. They have life experience. So they could come from the service industry, they could come from the military, they could come from a career break, stay-at-home parent. And we look for transferable skills. I am a firm believer that anybody can be a good sourcer or recruiter as long as they have some transferable skills that are super important. So they're organized, they're intrinsically motivated, they're good communicators, they have the ability to push through adversity. And there's a lot of roles outside of the recruiting industry that have all of those things. So what we do is we have a year-long program. It's a short-term employee at Meta. And we bring them in, we assign them mentors, and we train them for a year. And at the end, the goal is to convert them to full-time sourcers. So I love this program. I'm not going to say I would hire only people from this program, but some of the best sourcers that I have here at Meta came from this program. I have 3 people on my larger team right now. They're all crushing it. They have 6 months of sourcing experience, and they're performing at the same level as some of the people who have, a lot longer experience. So I'm very passionate about this. The class started yesterday. Our latest class did. So it's super exciting. People cry when they get their offers. I know it's so sweet, but it's a program that I'm very passionate about, and I still volunteer my time for, even though um, it's not something that is technically in my job description. So
Heck yeah. I mean, and you're getting a lot of agreement in the chat as well. Laura is completely in agreement with you on transferable skills, saying we have professional deep sea fishermen, stay-at-home parents, and former marketers who are their best recruiters.
yes.
And I would completely agree with that. I mean, like, I have a mint condition art history degree, never been used, and yet I was in Power to Fly's sourcing talent pool for like 6 or 8 months. It is something that anybody can learn to do. And you're right, some of the best skills needed for it are soft skills, and they're not anything that is strictly related to a particular profession. You know, they are soft skills that do have, you know, a lot of different uses for them.
It comes down to will versus skill. Like, I can train someone to Boolean search string, how to use LinkedIn, how to X-ray Google, how to scrape a website. Like, all of those things are trainable. What I can't teach you is how to intrinsically motivate yourself to reach goals, to push yourself, to learn new things, to want to learn new things. I had one sourcer for several years that he was fantastic at talking to people, but I couldn't have him send an email to a client because it looked like a small child wrote it. And so I worked with him for years, and he got a little bit better, but that's not something I can train. So, but he did so well at the meat of his job that he always did well. So everyone has things that they can work on. It's what makes you successful at your job.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you had said something in there when we were talking about your sourcing or your recruiting training program. But before we touch on that, I just want to highlight one question that was asked. Latasha had asked, is the wording choice for sourcing versus recruiting, is that something that's you know, synonymous at Meta, or is it a deliberate choice to use one term over the other?
It is a deliberate choice. That is a great question. So recruiting, not everyone, but recruiting is a more familiar term, right? So that is the person in HR that hires people, that helps the team hire. Sourcing and recruiting, how Meta defines it and how several organizations that I've worked at recently have defined it, is we've split the function of recruiting into 2 pieces. So sourcing is actually the front end of the process. So the finding of the candidates, the initial conversations, the selling them on the opportunity, and deciding if they're going to move forward in the process. Where Meta determines the recruiter handoff is at that stage where we decide that they're going to move forward to interview. So we transition the relationship from the sourcer to the recruiter, and the recruiter will be there to prep for the interview, gather feedback, and talk to the candidate through the process. When they give an offer, they'll do all of the offer negotiations, or take questions, or let them know if they're not moving forward. And then if they have accepted their offer, they'll walk them through to that onboarding stage. So their equipment, their questions, their introing to their new manager if they didn't interview directly with that manager. So it is intentionally separated. And I'm a sourcing manager, so I lead a team who are out there finding the candidates. I personally like this side better. I've been in sourcing now for, I think, 12 or 13 of my 15 years. I like the hunt. I like the selling of the conversation. It's both sides are great. And at this point in my career, I just prefer the front end of the process. We hire both at Meta. We hire sourcers and recruiters. We do have teams also that do full cycle where they do all of it. It just kind of depends on the team, but a majority of our team is split into sourcing and recruiting.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for kind of expanding on that for us. All right, now I wanted to go back and touch on a question that was related to, like, we talked about the incoming trainers, or sorry, training program. Goldie had asked about how one can inquire or initiate a conversation about mentorship in a hybrid work environment. Now, you talked about your training program and how they get kind of assigned mentors. But have you ever had, faced this issue of being in a hybrid work environment and trying to figure out how to find a mentor, how to approach somebody that or that you work with about mentorship?
Yeah, absolutely. So Meta, one of the things that we do really well is no matter what role you come in, you're assigned, we call them onboarding guides, mentor for lack of a better term, someone who's going to be there, your point of contact for questions. They'll help you with training. They're in addition to your manager. Um, I'm a firm believer that your career progression, your growth, things like that rests with you. Your manager or your leader or your peers are there to support you and help you. But if you want to grow, you need to figure out what you need to do to grow, for lack of better terms. I would say in a hybrid work environment, like things that I've done personally is I've had conversations with my manager on one-on-ones, like I want to grow, I want to learn more about your role, or I want to learn more about the director's role, or I want to learn more about internal mobility, which is like internal movement, things like that. Who do you recommend? And then they are more than happy, I guarantee you, to help make those connections. Additionally, your peers and your manager's peers are people that you are hopefully cultivating relationships with already. So you may have an idea of someone you'd like to mentor you. Um, Easy conversation overall, and reach out to them, ping them for a virtual coffee or walk or whatever you want to do and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you. I'd love for you and I to establish a mentorship relationship. Are you open to that? And they may say, I'm too busy, but they may also say yes. And if they're too busy, most likely most people will say, I may not be the best choice for you, but here is someone else. And so they'll make those connections for you. So don't be afraid to ask. Worst case, someone says no. But most people are very flattered to be asked to become a mentor. And especially here at Meta, one of the things that I love is our culture is very helping each other. So people, when I first started, there's so many questions. It's like a fire hose of information. Everyone that I met was like, oh, ask questions anytime. No questions, stupid. And I was like, oh, people have said that before. But here we actually walk that walk and people are still willing to help, even though I'm, no longer new. I still have questions and I still go to a very wide variety of people to ask. So.
Okay, cool. We're still getting questions coming in. Thank you to all of you for submitting them. We're going to try and get to as many as we can. I'm trying to go back and find this one. Oh, okay. So this person had said that as a sourcing manager, you probably get a lot of interruptions during a typical workday. Are there any ways that you use to designate like a focus zone or like a heads down work period to help get projects done, especially in a hybrid environment? I remember being in an office and literally putting a giant sign on my door that said, like, if you're not on fire, go away. Like, I needed that hour a day to, I think it was working in purchasing at the time. So I needed that to like receive all of our invoices and stuff. But how do you do this if you are in a hybrid environment? Is it possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Meta, we do have something called a balance bot where you can set your work hours. So during that time, anytime that you are off, so like you could set, 8 to noon and then 1 to 5 or whatever, anytime outside of those blocks, it will silence your notifications. So if pings come in, unless they put like at notify, which means it's urgent, you won't get those until you log back in. I'm a really big proponent of blocking off your calendar for those focus times. Our calendars have it built in automatically where you set a certain amount of meetings per day or time in meetings. And then it will not let you book other things. People can't book them because it has focus times. But I'm also very intentional. Like if I know that I'm going to lunch with someone on one day, I will block that off and put, everything's private, you can't really see it, but I will make it so it's not bookable over it. And the same thing if I have a big project to do. We implemented something this last half called no meeting Fridays. The only meetings we take on Fridays are client facing or like really important projects, like if you have to do it. We also do a virtual reality meeting. a lot of people are beta testing the Oculus, the virtual reality goggles. And we have something called workrooms where your little avatar goes and sits at a table with other people. It is super neat. It's one of my favorite times of the week. So we do that on Fridays, but that is more just hanging out and talking and feeling like you're in person with your little avatar. It's kind of like real life Sims. But other than that, like unless something super urgent comes off, Fridays are pretty much blocked off. It makes my Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, and Mondays to a certain extent a little more busy, a little more back to back, but it gives me more of that breathing time. And I can always move things from those days to Friday to have more intentionality in the week. So I think being good at calendar Tetris is probably a good skill to learn. But definitely blocking off that time and treating it as a meeting with yourself, treating it as just as important as if like I sent you a meeting invite. So.
Well, now I officially love the term calendar Tetris,
I know.
because yeah, that's definitely one I'm going to be taking with me for sure. Okay, so we have about 8 minutes left in today's chat. If we have time, I want to get to another couple questions, but I want to make sure that we left time to go over these questions that we asked you to share with us. So if what you're looking at now is a list of questions that we had sent out to Marina to get her response on them prior to today's session. Now, I'm really especially interested in the first one. So let's talk about this. What are some of the ways that you combat stress and anxiety? Because this is something that's affecting basically everybody in the country. And if it's not affecting you, it's probably affecting somebody you live with or someone that you work with. So what are some ways that you use to combat this?
Yes. So you gave me a really small box for this question. I actually have a lot more.
Yes, we did. Sorry.
So I think right now, some of the ways that I've done to combat stress and anxiety has been to explore the new area that I'm in. So I just moved to Austin in 2022. Again, rural Oklahoma to Austin, pretty big change, right? But as a single mom with 2 kids, I do a lot of taking my kids out and exploring the area. So they were in Lake Travis in January or February, like swimming, hanging out. No one else was in it, just my kids. But, I'm really connecting with nature, doing a lot of hiking, taking them to parks, we floated down the Kamal River, really being intentional with getting outside and connecting with the new area, because my stress and anxiety has been around moving with 2 small children to a new area. I also do a lot of working out. I get up organically by 5:30 in the morning. I just wake up. It's not a bad problem to have, but sometimes I would like to sleep in. But if I don't work out in the mornings, I don't do it. So I've made that time to really work out. I have a home gym that I've built up living rurally. I have probably everything you need for CrossFit and weightlifting and things like that. My sauna, which is this box behind me, used to be in a garage, but I don't have a big enough garage here. So I'm very intentional about taking care of myself that way. Additionally, and this is less taboo to talk about, but we have something called Lyra here at Meta, which is therapy. And so I'm very intentional about meeting with a therapist once a week just to talk through my anxiety, my thoughts, and things like that. I've also been very intentional about connecting with friends and making sure that I'm having virtual meetings with them, not meetings. We do virtual happy hours. Like a bunch of my friends from college will get on and we'll talk about different things, and really making sure that we keep that connection, because obviously the last couple of years travel has been very restricted. So I haven't seen some of them in 2-3 years at this point. So we're also trying out new restaurants, building out new traditions. My children, this is probably TMI, sorry, but like our menu for the week, my children, we have breakfast dinner on Mondays. So they get to pick, do they want pancakes? Do they want waffles? Should we make French toast? Should we do pancake bake, which is this not very great thing that they like. Tuesdays are taco or Mexican, Wednesdays pasta, Thursdays leftovers, because my fridge is not that big. Fridays we have pizza and movie night, and then the weekends are pretty open.
I love that.
Yeah, it helps create routine, makes my grocery bill easier.
Oh yeah.
And it helps being even when I'm working at home, it still helps with that routine. So
Yeah, I like that. Um, so total random curiosity, is the pancake baked? Is that something y'all got from Nadia?
no, I found it on the internet, and you
All
just
right.
you basically make it in a casserole dish, and you add a bunch of
Yeah,
fruit and stuff and bake it. It's probably the same thing,
it
but
might be. I'm telling you, she was on Great British Bake and has like 2 cooking shows on Netflix, and I will listen to that woman talk about anything. Like she's wonderful. But yeah, she makes something similar. So now you've inspired me. Now I'm gonna try that this weekend. Okay, so we are getting a ton of really great comments in the chat thread here, and I just want to give an absolute plus a million to your note about therapy. Y'all, you cannot pour water from an empty cup. Take care of yourself. Keep it, take it from somebody who did a absolutely horrific job of that in the last like 30, what am I, 35, 33 years. Like, take care of yourself. Block out that time for therapy. It's one of the things that I do. And you will be surprised how many people very much support that and then will want to like talk to you about like how can they get into therapy and all that kind of stuff, just because you're setting the example. I think, thank you, Marina, for talking about that, because hearing it from top down is just as important as hearing from your other teammates of like what's working for them. All right. So in the 3 minutes that we have to go, let's talk a little bit more about what your tips are for someone who first joins the team. Now, are these meta specific, or are these, advice tips that you think are useful no matter what company somebody is joining?
I think they're useful no matter what company you're joining. I think the most impactful advice that I was given is talk to as many people as possible. So every organization has its own culture, has its own acronyms. Meta is notorious for having, like, we have a dictionary of acronyms on our team, just because people will say them and we're like, sorry, what? But it was really impactful for me to start meeting with people when I first started here, when I first started my last job. It not just your direct team. Everybody meets with their direct team, right? You know your manager, maybe you met with your manager's manager, you meet with your peers, maybe you meet with your, like, maybe some of your direct reports peers, but it's really impactful to meet with like cross-functional partners, meeting with people that you don't even know if you're really going to need that relationship. You may find that this is one of the most impactful relationships that you have. I work cross-functionally with another sourcing manager who oversees the sourcing development program. And she is one of my favorite people at Meta. She actually lives here in Austin, which has been great. We've hung out with our kids and everything like that. But she has helped me so much in learning and transitioning. And she's not even on my team. The same, I work with a project manager that I still engage with, interact with, even though we don't have any projects together right now. I think building out these relationships, talking, you learn more about the culture, you feel more invested, you get help in ways you didn't know would help. You can get projects, like you can volunteer for projects you wouldn't have known about otherwise if that's what you like to do. It also shows you the organization as a whole. Maybe you joined on the R4R team and want to move to like the internal pathways team. It just gives you a richer experience at the organization, and you don't feel so siloed, and you don't feel so like all you do is the same thing every day.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. We've got Eric chimed in. I learned early on that when my kids were arguing or restless, to take them outside or give them a bath. Later realized it works great for adults too. And that's 100% something my mother has always told me. Seriously, I babysitted when I was younger. I was an au pair for a couple of years. Like, if the kid's not happy, put them in water. Bath, playtime, sand bucket,
Yep.
doesn't matter. Get out of your whatever space you're in, change that setting to get you a little bit of a paradigm shift. And I absolutely love that advice. Thank you, Eric, for chiming in there. All right, that is going to bring us to the end of our talk today. It always goes really, like, the time always goes so fast. But Marina, I just want to say big thank you for joining us today to talk about these. Now, we do have some hiring opportunities. So do you want to give us any more info on this while I share the links with people in the thread?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen a couple DMs pop up. It's easier to reach me on LinkedIn, which I think, Meg, you're going to put in the chat as well. Because I don't know once I get off the portal if I'm going to have access to those DMs. So we are hiring in a lot of parts of our organization right now. I have a lot of like sourcer roles posted on here, but I think we have around 1,200 total roles posted on the website. So take a look. They'll usually say next to it where they are located. So like the top one says US remote, that one can be anywhere. Like the Menlo Park one, that's hybrid. We aren't really, you can choose to go back in the office full time, but we're working on a hybrid model currently. So it's roughly 50% of the time in the office in remote, and it's kind of flexible there. A lot of these positions may be open to remote as well. We are building out our remote team and focusing on having a very large remote workforce, tapping into cities and parts of the country that we've never hired from before, because we've only really started doing remote the last 2 years with the pandemic. So lots of opportunity. My team hires for sourcers and recruiters. So I'm recruiting for recruiting. It's a fabulous job, by the way. I love it. You can definitely sell what you do. So I would just check that out. Our careers page, you can put in sourcer, you can put in recruiter. We're hiring tons of recruiting managers, sourcing managers, leadership, executive sourcers, executive recruiters. So these are just a snapshot. We hire in the US, what we call EMEA, Europe, and then APAC, which is like the Asian Pacific region. So, and then we also have Latin America as well. Sorry.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, I love that. So I shared the links for the roles that you see spotlighted on the slide in front of you. We've also got a couple more links we shared in the thread, places you can check out the Power to Fly community where you can interact directly with Power to Fly people. I'm in there all of the time. So if you got questions, taking them in there. And then we also shared links for Meta's company page on powertofly.com. That's where you can check out all of their open roles, not just the ones that we've linked here, as well as a link to a survey that we hope that you will take. It takes max 2 minutes to fill out, and real people read this, and we make concrete changes to these events based on what you all tell us. So let us know where we're doing well, but more importantly, let us know where we can do better for you. We want to make sure that, like I said, the time that you spend with us is well worth it. So let us know how we can make sure that these events are even more impactful and worthwhile for all of you. All right, that brings us to the end of time. Thank you to anyone that stuck with us. Apologies that we are 3 minutes over on your calendar hold, but we are so glad that you came and spent time with us today. If you are new to Power to Fly or new to these events, thank you so much for coming. We are so happy to meet you. And if you are one of our frequent flyers and we see you on here all the time, welcome back. Thank you so much. We cannot wait to see all of you again. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, and we'll be back tomorrow with even more great Power to Fly content. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.